Hello, and welcome to Got Protein Part 2, fourth time's the charm. We'll see if this is going to work for me. All right, just bear with me. So that is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's showing off his protein. And most people, when you ask them, where's your source of protein, they'll tell you got to eat animal products, meat, dairy, eggs, great source. And it turns out that myth has actually been busted. And well, I'm going to talk about eggs first off, since I didn't do my egg talk with cholesterol. And so eggs, there was a Harvard study on early stage prostate cancer. So this would probably be stage one before it's metastasized or spread into local tissue, and then which is stage two, and then stage 3 and 4 is when it starts metastasizing, spreading to other parts of the body. And what they looked at was that the men who ate eggs like 2.5 times per week had just 2.5 eggs per week. That's not very many. Had twice the progression of cancer, meaning metastasizing, moving along to other parts, and here specifically the bone. They had an 81% increase in mortality, which means death. So almost doubling the rate of death also. And the only thing worse, well, that's why the picture was already there, was chicken. Actually was 4 times the rate of cancer progression and mortality versus the men who didn't eat as many eggs. Must be either no eggs or only one a week, which would be they're not really eating eggs. It might be that the egg is in something. And the reason has to do with these molecules. So again, don't be afraid of the molecules. You still take chemistry. And that molecule in that picture showing the lower right, that is creatine, which so many people think is this wonderful. It's an amino acid, and phenylalanine also an amino acid. So they have the amino group and acid group. So phenylalanine is one of the building blocks for our proteins. Creatine is an amino acid. It just has a slightly different form. And it's not one of the building blocks of our proteins. Our body actually can make it, so it's not essential. Whereas for your animals, your pets, cats and dogs, actually have to eat meat because their body doesn't create creatine on its own. And so, or you have to supplement them with creatine, but our body actually does make creatine. I would guess the liver, I don't remember off the top of my head. But what happens is from high heat of cooking, these two amino acids, when they are found together, they form that molecule at the top, which is known as a heterocyclic amine. So cyclic means those hexagons. They're not, and amine means those nitrogen groups, and has multiple nitrogen groups. And this is a carcinogen. It is a known carcinogen. It's found very highly in poultry. And so chicken has a really high amount of phenylalanine and creatine. And so when you cook, it's at high temperatures, which is how people cook chicken. Your animals can actually eat it raw, whereas we as humans don't. My animals eat it raw, and they've been doing it for over 5 years. Somebody told me to do that, and it was a game changer for them. So grilling, which is how people prefer their chicken, or frying, are really high temperatures, or broiling. Those high temperatures are going to form lots of this molecule, and that just means cancer. And to add on to it, if you cook it in the presence of sugar, which is, oh, Chick-fil-A, anyone? Yeah, that barbecue sauce, there's no such thing as barbecue sauce without added sugar. You create what is called age, which is the first question on your homework. There's my poopy. So Shanti is 9 pounds. It's not that I'm that short. You all know that. That is charred from my garden, not currently, but in the spring, summer, and fall months. It just came up wild. I've never really planted it. And she does eat chicken bones if you don't cook the chicken, the dogs can eat the bone. Once you cook the chicken, the bone splinters, and that can actually harm the animal. But it was a friend of mine in yoga, because my cat was having issues, told me that their vet had recommended they start feeding their cat raw chicken. And it was a game changer. My cat has been thriving since, and my dog. So this is a picture of this dude, Patrick, who I don't know how long ago this picture is from, but he was considered the strongest man in the world at one time. And he is vegan. And there is one of the videos you can watch for this next week. One of the documentaries is called The Game Changers. I've never actually seen it, but it is these elite athletes who actually are all vegan. A lot of bodybuilders, like the competitive bodybuilders, actually are vegan because it gives them an advantage. One of the stories I heard, not from the movie, but was another one, was a guy who used to play for the Oakland Raiders when the Raiders were in Oakland. And he was one of the either offensive or defensive linemen. So the linemen are the biggest guys on the team. So again, over 250 pounds. And he was vegan, and he didn't want anybody to know, not because of the stigma of being this big guy who only ate his vegetables, but because he said it gave him an advantage, and he didn't want anybody to know about his advantage. And the advantage was it gave him stamina. And so by not eating animal products, he made it through 4 quarters. And he said in the first 2 quarters, he was just like a regular lineman. But by the third quarter, and definitely the fourth quarter, he dominated the line because everybody else was starting to fatigue and stuff. And he, yeah, just absolutely loved it. And so nuts, we did our week on nuts and seeds, are a really great source of protein with fiber. And there we go at the bottom and top left are legumes, which is your challenge for the week, to try to incorporate legumes, but also vegetables have the perfect ratio, have wonderful protein. They're really high in water. Nuts, as I said, and actually your grains, the whole grains, do actually have protein in them. Quinoa is the one that has the most protein, and I'll be talking about quinoa more next week. So age, what age stands for is advanced glycation end products. And that picture in the upper right hand corner drives me crazy because I'm a biochemist, and those pictures, I don't even fully know what's going on there. But one of the words that you see is it says ROS, and that means free radicals. And so age is one of the greatest acronyms because it tells you what it's going to do. And again, here's another one of these crazy slides that people, I guess it makes them feel smart, but basically it's making you produce more cortisol. It's causing inflammation. So rage stands for the receptor for age, and it makes you raging, creates insulin resistance and stuff. And it is created when we combine sugar with protein. And it creates oxidative stress. It oxidizes the heck out of your body. Inflammation, it cross-links to everything, to every organ, to every cell, to your blood vessels. And so we've made cholesterol this huge culprit, and saturated fat, and protein turns out might be a big culprit. Fructose combined with protein. So it's the combination of the two, because we all are like, nope, cutting out the sugar. You all have done that, and you've all done brilliantly. And I've been so impressed with how much you played along. But when I'm suddenly saying we have to look at the type of protein intake, that's where people draw a line and say, no, don't touch my protein. But fructose combined with protein, 1,000 times better at creating these age products, which are, this is a quote, I don't remember from who, but clumps of useless debris resistant to the body's digestive and cleansing processes. Basically, you just get all this debris all over, cross-linking, accelerating aging, as it says, and diabetes. This is a picture, a graph, and I apologize, I don't remember where I got it from, and it was the amount of nitrosyl, those heterocyclic amines, And at the top, pretty much 6 of the top 10 are chicken. And it just has to do with how we prepare chicken. That chicken itself is really high in creatine and phenylalanine, and how we prepare chicken. Hot dogs. So again, I told you there was a guy who was a centurion. I heard an interview and all he ate hot dogs. He lived to be 100, but he boiled the hot dogs. He did not broil or grill them. And it's that high heat of broiling, of grilling, of frying that is creating. And so the air fryers, when they're on the high heat, they're still giving the high heat. So you're taking away the oil, but you're still getting to a high heat. The fast food hamburgers up there, tofu. I never broil tofu, and I do just a quick stir fry where it goes in the oven. So broiling is when you're using the top part of the oven and it's sending the heat down, and that allows you to get to a temperature. Again, it's how you cook your food, not necessarily that's as important as the food you're eating. So we want to be eating whole food, closer to plant-based, as close to plant-based fully as you can be. And you want to cook it by either baking, temperatures 375 or less, um, or on the stovetop. Um, yeah, and you can see even an apple, but when you're getting to those levels, those are probably background levels, or the raw tomato. All right. And here we go. I thought I'd shown this slide before. So endogenous means inside us. So we naturally do create these that our body makes when we eat high sugar diets. So gluten fruit are high glucose and fructose. Exogenous age are from the outside, and that is the cured meat. And that is animal protein, is because of the amount of creatine. So tofu doesn't have the creatine in there. So any of the processed meats, the cured bacon, salami, and the high heat of cooking them makes it go up 1,000-fold increase. So the barbecue chicken, they took a diet, the exact same diet, and they fed it to 2 different groups of people. And one type, they didn't say specifically, or I didn't read that far, what the diet specifically was, but they steamed or boiled for 10 more minutes, and the other group they fed and they broiled the food, the meal. And the ones that they broiled it, they then are able to read markers for age as well as how well arteries relax. And they found the ones that were broiled, so that means high temperature, a 67% decrease in the relaxation of your arteries. Your arteries are not able to relax and contract. So think high blood pressure. And also that increase in the age markers. They then actually reversed the groups and a couple days later. And so the group that had got the steam boiled, and they actually saw the exact same results. So that was like their control. They couldn't say, hey, these people already had these issues or whatever. And they were already probably controlled. They were already probably 30-year-olds that they were doing this with. And so eating more plant-based, when you're eating fruit, you're not cooking it. Chewing our food, the importance of that, and eating raw salads as well as nuts. So if we look around us, yeah, the top 5 cancer-causing foods, pretty much everywhere you look, that we've talked about sugar, the deep frying of the sugar, which is the donuts, the deep frying of the starches, which is the potatoes, but burning meat, and the hot dogs, a highly processed food. The anti-cancer, they're always going to throw in whatever they can, and it's always going to be vegetable or fruits or spices. So this is just one specific website, but that just allowed me that picture. So what happens? What does age do to you? So arthritis, kidney disease, different types of kidney disease. Neph is kidneys. So nephropathy means pain in the kidneys. So that lower back pain, it can be from the spine, but it's actually up a little bit into the sides. That can actually be an indication of kidneys, and leading to kidney failures. So your kidneys are really overworked by high protein diet. And I get to that in a later slide. Atherosclerosis, which is the buildup of plaque in the arteries, and the arteries being too hard, not able to contract. So you get those small dense LDLs. That's coming from eating the high protein with sugar diets. And it also, this is the thing that's interesting, is these guys, the age, the debris is blocking the LDLs from delivering their load and coming back to the liver as HDLs. So you see it in diabetics, they actually have a much higher prevalence of age, and that's going to be because of the glucose that's floating around in their bloodstream. And so it's diet. Neurological issues, so dementia, coordination, neuropathy is what that's supposed to say, and cancer. Cancer cells love age. And you pick any type, erectile dysfunction, incontinence, eye health. And so again, this is high protein with a combination with sugar, so it's not just sugar. So skin, wrinkles, anything that's from aging is, they gave it a perfect acronym. And so there you go. So they're in the upper corner. It talks about that bacon is actually considered as much a carcinogen as smoking. But I don't think there's labels. Possibly in California, they have to label the bacon when they sell it. Class 1 carcinogen, it's really hard to be a class 1 carcinogen. It means no doubt at all it causes cancer. Smoking, cigarette is a class 1 carcinogen. Smoking anything actually, because of the toxins you're putting in your lungs and that you're releasing for all the people around you. Plutonium, and I'm pretty sure none of you are going to put plutonium on your food. And all this processed meat, and especially the cured meat, because in the curing process, you create these nitrosamines that are known to cause cancer. And sunlight, overexposure to sunlight. All right. And that is because of the age. Excuse me, problem with my PowerPoint today. And so that is the ribbon for prostate cancer, the purple one. And so there we go. These are all the cured meats. So if you're going to eat meat, it's the amount of meat we eat in our culture, and that we're eating a lot of meats that are cured and processed. Whereas the food at the top that we do every time we eat, choose to eat more vegetables and more fruit. They're not processed. This is actually interesting, and you can Google it if you're interested. And most students are repulsed by this idea, but it is our future, and is the idea that we're gonna, because there's other issues with the amount of animal products we eat, that we're gonna be growing our proteins in the laboratory, meaning not the animal, that all we need is the cells, and that they are creating these cells that will produce protein that tastes just like what we're all used to. This in the upper left-hand corner is what you guys get to do. Rather than making up your own recipe this week, you actually will have to find one from their website, and it's in our thing. It's called Forks Over Knives because you need a knife if you eat animal products. Whereas if you're eating vegetable products, you usually just use a fork. So that's why I call it Fork Over Knives. They are completely vegan. It's oil-free, very low sugar, and it is a vegan recipe. I'm not asking you to be vegan for the week, although some students do decide they want to try it. I'm asking for one dish at one meal. If you would like for your next healthy challenge to try to be vegan for the month, go for it, because there are unhealthy ways to be vegan, but there are very healthy ways. And so, oops, we don't want to do that. All right. This is actually something, though. This is the second question, I think, in your homework for this video, is would you eat cricket? And so I had a student one year who asked if he could do his topic on cricket. And I said, sure, because I was intrigued and I didn't know. And he had been in a speech class and somebody had done a speech on it. He actually made cricket brownies for the class. He actually ordered the cricket flour, and something I have on my to-do list and I never do. But you can see from this slide, if you compare cricket to cow or beef, that has far fewer calories, because there's not very much fat in there, but very similar amount of protein, 100 grams, pretty comparable. So almost 19 compared to 23.5. So that's similar, but you're cutting the fat way down. You obviously need a lot more crickets to get to that. But the amount of the environmental impact, that crickets have a very, very low environmental impact. So you need hardly any land. And I have some pictures in the next slides. The water usage. So this is something that, yay, hooray for eating animal products. This is the whole thing, is environmentally. When I gave up eating animal products, it was because I read Gandhi's autobiography as I was driving across the country my first time when I was 28 years old, something like that. And I decided I wasn't going to eat animal products. It was very difficult to be vegan at that time. And I also was much younger and did not understand how to do it in the healthiest way. And so I am not vegan. I'm whole food plant-based. I do eat fish every once in a while because people bring me wild caught salmon. But somebody I worked with said, "Oh, why are you vegan?" And she gave me a list of 10 reasons. And I thought, well, I read Gandhi's autobiography, and that wasn't one of her reasons. And one was the environmental impact, and I had never heard of that. But eating animal products has a huge impact because, one, on the land, but okay, you can argue they're using land that we're not using for other uses. The amount of water they're eating our food, and the amount of CO2, a greenhouse gas, that is produced. This is looking at beef versus, right, poultry. You can see is much less, versus the cricket using 1 gallon versus 1,000 gallons. If we look at how much protein is in the flour, and I don't know if that's what that comparison is. And if you look at making cricket, yeah. Anyway, at the amount of protein in the flour is actually quite a bit more than it is in the other ones. And the greenhouse gas, no comparison. And so there's a picture of growing cows. That is a nice picture. You can go online and see some really disturbing pictures of how your beef is mass produced. And this is a cricket farm. The picture I couldn't find, I found it 5 years ago, was actually they were growing them in cities, the crickets. They were raising them, not growing them, in cities. And they were these beautiful, like, domes that the crickets lived in. And then, of course, they are. There's the cricket cookies that are made from the cricket flour. There are cricket protein bars. So my student made cricket brownies and I ate them. Most of the students would not. I actually found cricket treats for my dog. They were on like clearance because nobody wanted them. And this is just looking at the ingredients, which these bars are actually fairly healthy. And this guy's got a big smile on his face. He's saying, "Hey, look, here's crickets." Because even though there is fat, the fat is from the almonds. They're not using flour, they're using whole dates and honey, and the cricket flour. The thing is because it's crickets, if you have an allergy to shellfish, you cannot have it because the shell is made out of the same thing, but which probably must be calcium carbonate. And there we go. This is a protein bar that is not cricket based to compare it to. That it is this blend. So in the lower right hand corner, this is a blend of highly processed protein, which is whey protein concentrate, milk protein isolate. As soon as you put the word isolate, you have made it into something that is extremely toxic to your body. Soy protein isolate is the link of soy to cancer. If you eat the whole food, the link goes away. All this highly processed protein drinks is a nightmare. Corn syrup. If you are doing a protein drink, please read the label. This This has the fewest number of ingredients I've seen of any of these protein bars. Again, this is not the Cricket one. The Cricket one's in the upper right-hand corner. The sweetener is one of the alcohol sugars, which actually are showing up. There haven't been a lot of research done, but they light up your brain and you actually tend to eat more, and they mess up your microbiome. They also use edible vegetable oil as opposed to other vegetable oils that are not edible, but they're admitting like there's corn syrup and the highly processed vegetable oils in there. And oh, we put a few almonds at the end. The almonds would have no saturated fat. Um, Interestingly, the amount of saturated fat in the Cricket one, I never even noticed that. That's fascinating. Did they list? They didn't list cholesterol though, so I don't know. But here they do underline, this is somebody else, not me, who underlined it, that contains an oligofructose as a dietary fiber that is known to cause serious problems to us. So there's this whole push that, oh, it doesn't cause an increase in your blood glucose. So everything's been mono. We're looking at stuff that, oh, it's good for diabetics because their blood sugar doesn't go up. Again, the fructose causes so much more damage because we're not looking at that. And so this is an F factor fiber protein bar. And again, has the first ingredient is soluble corn fiber. So in case you want to know what that means the part of the corn husk that they're throwing away because it's not digestible. And anyway, if you watch that one documentary that was on, they were admitting that they were adding sawdust, corn dust to our cereal as a filler. And so this is pretty much admitting that. Again, the brown rice protein concentrate. So even though this is vegan, this is like the unhealthiest thing out there. We're taking brown rice, which was healthy, and we're isolating the protein out of it. So just because something's labeled vegan does not make it healthy. The peanut flour, at least it's the whole peanut that they're making into a flour, but why not make your own? And then you don't have to do that. It does have different oils, peanut oil, palm kernel oil, which means highly processed. And this is one of my students back in Chem 106 had said, well, you know, I do these protein drinks, this protein powder. The guy at the club told me to do it, who's getting money off of you, by the way. That's why they push it as you walk in. And so I said, well, send me a picture of the ingredients and I'll look at it and tell you if I think it's good or not. And by the way, there, look, magnesium, zinc, copper, chromium, sodium, potassium. You guys have to pick either a mineral or a vitamin that you're going to research for your next paper. So if you haven't, be doing that. Let me know what you're picking. It has to be a vitamin or a mineral, not a supplement, not an additive, a specific vitamin or mineral. And so the first thing is milk protein isolate. So I'm like, well, do I have to go any further? Oh, calcium caseinate. So casein, again, we saw was opioids. So that's isolated. Milk protein, again, whey protein concentrates. Basically, we took milk. And even though I don't drink milk, at least in milk, you're getting it as a whole food. And here we're isolating all the stuff from it. So we're making it into a carcinogen. And then we add a non-dairy creamer, which has sunflower oil in it. And can we go on? Tocopherols is vitamin E. And there's the soluble corn fiber to make a filler in there again, and more whey protein isolate, and more canola oil, and then hydrolyzed whey protein concentrate. Oh, and as a sweetener, let's put in the like most toxic sucralose, artificial sweetener there is. Anyway, I was like, where do I begin? The serving size is 2 scoops, and the container only has about 11. And here we go, looking at protein 1 bar, not much better, that you have all this protein isolate. You get the idea. I don't think I had you looking at a food label for this week. And I should have had you. So this is more on your own. Look at the label and look at the protein. Because most people just say, hey, look, it says protein 1. Protein is so important. They name protein correctly, the most important. 10 grams of protein. I'm good. It's only 15% of what I need for the day, which they're trying to say you need like 80 grams of protein. We'll get to that in a few minutes. It is that all this protein is highly isolated, which that's not how it's supposed to be. So with that, let's talk about the pH scale. I know it's not a chemistry class, but how you can talk about protein or any of this stuff without talking about pH. A couple of you did mention it in your talks. So 7 is neutral on the pH scale. That does not mean that's better. And if you do this in a test tube, all your fruits and vegetables are acids. Things that are bases are the cleaners in your house. Soap, baking soda, ammonia, drain cleaner. Our blood is what we care about. And our blood is actually very slightly alkaline all the time. In fact, if you were at a pH of 7, you would be dead. So our blood pH needs to be in a range of about 7.3, 7.2 to 7.4, and above and below that, if you're too low, if you're at the lower end, below, as it says, the 7.35, you're in acidosis. Below 7.2, and pretty much you go into a coma. And alkalosis is when you go too high. You want to be in that normal. It's a really fine line. So the pH scale is a logarithmic scale, as is the earthquake, the Richter scale. And so every one difference, a whole one, is a tenfold difference. This is causing a very slight difference in the pH, is where our blood thrives. So you take anatomy, you go into nursing school, you learn all the signs of metabolic acidosis. Everything causes headaches and blood pressure. This is a better picture, I think, than all those words, which is alkaline blood, which means the normal, the 7.35 to 7.45. And it looks nice and pink and like they're round circle. We imagine blood. Acidic blood, we're talking below the 7.3, 7.2 to 7.3. And Americans are in a state of chronic metabolic acidosis. Most Americans have blood in the range of 7.2 to 7.3. You're not dead. You're not in a coma. You're functioning, but you're functioning with that blood. And the number one cause of acidic blood, you can see it on the slide, is animal protein, is meat. Number 2 is sugar, and then the highly processed white bread and everything, coffee, soft drinks, alcohol, cigarettes, a lot of prescription drugs, and of course, processed food, which, in my opinion, processed food needs to move up. What causes your blood to be alkaline is vegetables and fruits, because in the vegetables and fruits, there are a lot of minerals, and your blood needs those minerals to work to buffer the pH. And so it's eating that whole food plant-based, and we want to be alkaline again there. And so if you're going to eat crap, you're going to have acidic blood. And if you're going to eat more of the rainbow, which next week, we're going to come back and talk about this more next week. So the more you choose to eat plant-based, the more alkaline your blood will be. So this is that wall of words that goes, I'm not going to read it, but it was just a quick Google search, and it was the first thing that came up, and it was perfect. It was a review of diet-induced metabolic acidosis. They're saying low grade because you're still functioning. The article I read was over 25 years ago, and it was in an acupuncture journal. And so it's nice to see it showing up in nutrition journals, but people don't read journal nutrients. But what this is saying is the excessive consumption of acid precursor foods. What you're saying is phosphorus, that's your soda, and proteins. They should have said animal proteins, but they're afraid to say that. So to cut to the chase, and these are things that happen. You get kidney stones, you get bone resorption. Yeah, the demineralization of your bones. The number one cause of osteoporosis is animal protein. Yet the dairy industry somehow has convinced everybody that dairy is going to prevent it, when actually dairy may be the cause of osteoporosis. Anyway, more on that as we go along. Chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes, hypertension. Hepatic means liver stress, which is like the biggest issues now. And their recommendation is we need more fruit and vegetables and an appropriate supply. And this is a figure from theirs, which shows you the amount of money they have. So you get creaky bones, you get bone fractures. What's happening is your body pH is your blood pH isn't acidic, and so your body's trying to buffer it with calcium, and you have a store of calcium in your bones. So the calcium from your bones comes out and it's trying to buffer the blood, and then it doesn't go back in your bones, it goes into your joints, and your joints become creaky and stiff. The kidneys there in the middle. And this is Joey and I went to the Oz Museum. So cool. We drove through Kansas, and so we stopped there and we had fun. But cortisol. So the cowardly lion is cortisol. He's afraid of everything, and that leads to loss of your lean mass, those muscles, and high blood pressure. And insulin resistance is there in the middle, the IR, so type 2 diabetes, and your kidneys. It's so hard on your kidneys. So we're going to look at a little bit of chemistry here. Eating the rainbow. So the rainbow is really high. The number one source of bicarbonate, the key is bicarbonate. So our blood has this carbonic acid, which can break down into bicarbonate and the hydrogen ion. The more hydrogen ion you have, the lower your pH. That's the key. It has to do with the guy who came up with the pH scale. More acidity means more hydrogen, which means a lower pH. So the lower the pH, the more acidic. And so we're dead below a pH of 7. So we're always going to be slightly alkaline. Also has to do with our body temperature is 37 and not 20. But we can regulate the amount of hydrogen in our body with our breathing because of exhaling the CO2. So if your lungs are compromised and you can't get rid of the CO2, this is going to cause respiratory acidosis because the CO2 is going to push into your blood, which is going to try to compensate at the other end, which is our kidneys. So your kidneys regulate the bicarbonate. So bicarbonate's a good thing. And when you're getting it in whole food, it's going to help to buffer the pH because it's going to bind to the hydrogen. And so you're not going to have as much hydrogen and the pH isn't going to drop as much. So the number one source of bicarbonate is potatoes. Those white potatoes that are so badly maligned. So Sherpas love potatoes. It's one of the few things that grows at altitude, and they didn't have issues with diabetes until we introduced things like soda and processed food to them. And so Pimba took us to Alubari, which is the high potato field. So this is in Nepal, and that is straight down there. And I think I may be the only white person on this planet who's actually walked this path because this is not a trekking route. Pimba decided he wanted to take us up to meet the yak herders. And so we hiked up with all we had was a lunch and a 2-person tent. And we didn't even have the 2-person tent yet. Sorry, all we had was our lunch. And he said, we'll find the yak herders. And yeah, I ate my lunch and I said, where's the yak herder? Because you're really hungry when you're high altitude. But anyway, this was the goat herder we found, and we waited for him to come. And because some dude with the ponies told us to go there, and he came with all of his goats. He had over 200, only 2 or 3 were male, and the baby goats climbed all over us because we were going to sleep in their area. And then he was like the hostess with the mostest. I didn't speak a word of Nepal, speak a word of English, but he had the greatest smile. Pimba was our translator. And that's Joey 12 years ago. So he had picked wild mushrooms, and I was so hungry, I didn't care what kind of mushrooms they were. And I do terrible at altitude. So he made us the most scrumptious food, fed us, and then we slept where the goats would have slept. That's Joey and me snuggled up. And I woke up in the morning and walked outside, that's where the restroom is, and that was my view. The sunrise over Annapurna, which is the 10th highest peak in the world. And then he gave us some fresh goat milk, the only time I have had goat milk. And then the ponies showed up again, and the ponies came because the best fertilizer for the apples that were down 1,000 meters below us, 3,000 feet, is goat poop is the perfect fertilizer for apples. And so there they, and then he told us where the yak herder was. And so we went on a hike, and Pimba picked more wild mushrooms. And this is the cave that was the yak herders. And I was freaking out because I'm like, there's no way that we can live in this cave, that we can stay here. We need to go before, But the yak herder showed up and kind of nodded at Pimba, and he made us a full meal. And then he insisted we go to his high camp where the yaks were. So we went up another like 500 feet. And by this time we're at like 4,000 feet. basically the top of Mount Rainier. We saw blue poppy, which is extremely rare. Like it's one of the rarest flowers, and because it only grows at high elevation. And the golden butterfly, which only also is found high in the Himalayas. And then we found the yaks, and we found a lot more yaks. And then we hiked over Thorongwa Pass and couldn't have carried all the bags because I was doing terrible. Because now we're at 5,400 meters, and over the rainbow we met this guy when we went over the Thorongwa Pass who made the best food of all time. And right, when I say going over the rainbow or eat the rainbow, this is next week. Something to look forward to. I don't mean eating Skittles or M&Ms or all the ways that we have terribly made the rainbow. Reminder that the commercial baked goods are going to, right, make your brain depressed, oxidative stress, overstimulation, dopamine, that you need. We don't want our brain shrunk. You need to eat your fruits and veggies. So, which diet eats their vegetables? Mediterranean diet is one of the healthiest diets there is, and then the typical Western diet. So let's walk through these parts of the brain. So the temporal lobe, which you can see there, is nice and healthy and has this huge gaping hole in the Western diet. That's temporal is the side of our head. That's where our hearing centers are. It's how we receive information and then form our words for speech. And so the Mediterranean diet, it looks nice. There's that big gaping hole. That can't be good for communication. The ventricular system, we also have this big gaping hole, and this is how we transport and move fluid through the cerebral spinal fluid. It bathes our central nervous system. And the Mediterranean diet is considered one of the healthiest diets. Longevity, lowest rates of things like Alzheimer's and other neuro issues. And then the hippocampus, again, you see that huge, weird hole. It doesn't look the same. The two don't. Hippocampus is learning and memory. So to me, the pictures speaks everything. Why you should eat more vegetables, and why you should eat a lot less sugar, because sugar shrinks the brain. And so the acidosis cycle that we can see, alkaline foods, that they're pretty much the green foods, the purples, the orange, the vegetables, and that, yes, the acidity of the blood is what pulls calcium from your bones and then also leads to cancer, osteoporosis, arthritis, blockage of lymph nodes, so your immune system isn't going to drain properly, inflammation, gum lines receding. And so, of course, we see the corn syrup, we see the ice cream, breakfast cereal. Yeah, mustard. This one interested me because you can find healthy mustard choices that don't have all the added high fructose corn syrup. But the other thing that's in there, sorry, we're going to go back for a second, is the acidosis, besides being the highly processed, the sugars and stuff, is all the animal products, which, so let's talk about a high protein diet, which is Americans are getting about 100 grams per day. I think it's actually higher than this. The slide I made, well, probably like 15 years ago. And I'm pretty sure it's much higher now because the amount of animal products I see people eating, and it is double. We need about 50 grams per day of protein, total the size of your fist in the whole day, not each meal. And so protein is with sugar and the processing. That is how you acidify your blood. Animal protein, by the way, it is protein from vegetable sources. If it's not processed, if it's not isolated, actually alkalinizes your blood. And again, it's in the vegetable sources. It's a whole food, and so it's coming with all the minerals that comes packaged with. And so this pulls calcium from your bones, leading to osteoporosis, fractures, and arthritis. So yes, as I mentioned, dairy pays a lot of money to cover this up and to have you believe that their product is going to prevent osteoporosis. Studies were done decades and decades, and these continue, looking at African American women versus women in Africa and looking at rates of fracture. And the women in Africa will have like 5 to 10 children. They'll breastfeed each child for at least 2 years. Uh, and they have absolutely no issues with osteoporosis, fractures, and arthritis. And they're doing they also thought it was because they're much more mobile. They're always walking and carrying stuff, so they have to walk to a clean water source. The African American, the woman in this country or from Africa, had had osteoporosis, fractures, arthritis, the same as anybody else in this country. And it's when they really looked, so they're taking out the genetic factor. When they looked at it, the culprit was the animal products, and especially milk. Uh, Cancer lives only in an acidic environment, meaning 7.2 to 7.3. If you keep the blood alkaline, the cancer cells can't thrive. And under that, degenerative diseases. So the China study, this is one of the videos that it's the one I suggest is Forks Over Knives, and they discuss the China study. It's an exceptional documentary. If you're in my Chem 106, you have to pick a different one because you had to watch it. I highly recommend you can find this book used for a couple bucks. It is extremely sciencey, but T. Colin Campbell grew up on a dairy farm, and he went to school to study meats and he then got his first job like in the Philippines. They talk about in the movie, the documentary, and he went there to help these poor famished people to get more meat, to figure out how can I get more high protein to these people. It has to be animal products, and he was not ready for what ended up changing his life, which was it was the animal products, the people who were the rich people who could afford the animal products had the higher rates of cancer and degenerative diseases and heart disease, whereas the poor people who ate no animals, they couldn't afford it, did not have any of this. And liver disease was the other big one. And so it was at the time the biggest study. It was looking at people he then he's vegan. He doesn't say he's vegan because veganism has become extremely unhealthy process. He's whole food plant-based. He's several books out. Amazing. I think he's might be 90 now and is thriving. But in the study, they looked at rural China, they looked at US diet, and they looked at Oxford was in this too, so England, and they found this huge correlation of people, the more animal products you ate, 17-fold increase in heart disease, a 5-fold increase in breast cancer, kidney disease. So there you go, your kidneys. That's the only way you can get rid of the nitrogen. So amino acids have nitrogen on them. When you take in twice as much protein as your body needs, even if you're exercising, that your kidneys have to get rid of the nitrogen so you can store the carbon, hydrogen as saturated fat and cholesterol. And the only way you can get rid of nitrogen is to go through what's called the urea cycle, which is what your kidneys do. And so a high protein diet pretty much destroys the kidneys. The good news is you can heal. Yeah. People, when you're in the hospital, if you're in there for kidney issues, you're put on a low protein diet because of this fact. There's no fiber in animal products, even though people think there is. So the Atkins diet, which is now the keto diet, that most people actually don't have bowel movements daily on the Atkins diet. I know the study that I saw they did up at OHSU, and they compared the Mediterranean diet, Atkins, and I'm not remembering the other two they looked at. Mediterranean always gets high. We're going to talk about the Mediterranean diet. It's very highly plant-based. They do eat some fish or some local poultry. It's probably how they also, and they live the longest. They live extremely healthy. They have the lowest rates of all the different diseases and stuff. Now, of course, there's people who are not following the Mediterranean diet in the Mediterranean areas. But on the study up at OHSU, the people on the Atkins diet was like every 5 days they'd have a bowel movement. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. But it was that you pretty much are not eating carbs. And some of you even said, oh, this was the dark side on somebody's thing was, oh, it's high in carbs. Please don't go there, you guys. There are really good whole food has very healthy carbohydrates, which is your starches and fibers and your body, and it's filled with minerals, and your body's going to digest it and absorb it. And high protein diet. In fact, high protein was the paleo phase that we went on these high protein diets for several years. And they don't recommend them anymore. That was a fad. It went out of fad and the high fat came back. And they even say this in places. Well, nobody would ever tell you to eat a high protein diet, even though everybody is, because it causes you to die really young. Yeah, so people were dying on these diets. But anyway, a high protein diet does send you into acidosis, ketosis. They just call it ketosis because they don't want to admit that it's making you acidic and your cancer cells. So your body, if it doesn't take in carbohydrates, it needs another fuel and it has to start making ketones. And it makes the ketones from fat, but you totally eliminate. There's also the whole thing of the exposure. So almost everybody who talked about a plant food said, so say broccoli, the dark side of broccoli was that you have this exposure to pesticides from spraying the plants. The exposure to the pesticides is actually much higher in animal products because the animals are eating all this food that is sprayed with pesticides and all this other stuff. Antibiotics are given like unbelievably to these animals. Gal, like 20 years ago, so she'd be probably 40 now, she won the high school science competition. She was from West Virginia, and all she did was go take a sample of water in her backyard, and it had outrageous rates of the antibiotics. And it was because it wasn't from flushing it down our toilets, from people getting rid of, like taking antibiotics. It was they were downstream from a meat factory farm, and it was the amount of antibiotics given to the animals. Also, growth hormone, and those are all other things. And high protein actually, as well as the high sugar diets, they actually suppress your immune system. And that background is Mother Earth, that it's not sustainable for us to eat the way Americans eat. So I'm not anti-animals protein. If you want to eat animal protein, it's the amount that we eat is 2 to 4 times the amount. I am anti the highly processed, isolated protein that is in those drinks and bars that people eat because that is not healthy. So this is flipped. So the alkaline is now on the left. And this is just speaks volumes. So on the left, you're eating your fruits and vegetables, and on the right, you're eating highly processed meat. And there's no comparisons. This person is still alive. He's going to class. He's doing stuff. Look at their immune cells. If we want to talk about COVID, that immune cell is not going to do anything for anybody. Look at the red blood cells. They look like ninja weapons. How is that going to bind to oxygen? And so I talked about that at the beginning. These guys who are bodybuilders found that when they went to vegan, they had an edge. And look at the blood. Is there any question why? And they were bodybuilders. They're not doing these protein drinks and stuff. And back to ketones, that high protein diet or the keto diet, you're making ketones. And cancer cells love ketones. It's their preference. If they also like glucose, but they prefer ketones. And so double breast cancer growth and metastasis moving to other cell parts of the body. In all the experimental, these numbers tell you, this is from Dr. Krager's book. So breast cancer often metastasizes to the liver, which is very fascinating because the liver is the only place your body can make ketones. Ketones have been glorified. I don't understand it. With all my background in biochemistry, I'm like, why would anybody want to be in ketosis? And all these doctors are promoting it. Your liver is where you're making ketones. And that is where so many cancers move to because they're like, hey, this is great. We're going to go to the place where all the action is. When they dripped ketones directly on breast cancer cells, they were actually able to change them into a more aggressive form of the cancer. And this actually was one of the things that fascinated me is in the pharmacological world, the drug world, that when they're looking for cancer suppressors, cancer chemotherapeutic agents, they're looking at ways to block ketones because they know this as a fact that cancer cells thrive on ketones. And the meta-analysis, when they looked at all of them, what they find is diets high in saturated fat. So you're eating food that is high in saturated fat. You saw a 50% increase. So 100% means a double, but 50% increase in deaths from breast cancer. So meaning you didn't recover and continue on with a vibrant life. The official recommendation for cancer is the exact opposite of the keto diet, which is you eat more plants, high vegetable, high fruit, whole grains, legumes, low in saturated fats. Intake of saturated fat is coming from eating animal food. When you eat animal protein, you're eating animal food, unless they grow the cells. And then that's a whole nother world that we're creating. This is a slide from my first day that our federal guidelines tell us that 25% of your diet can be total crap. This is our government regulations. And most Americans, this is pre-COVID, this number's got to be 98 to 99% now. And I know this is off, that it's actually 4% of the average American diet is fruits and vegetables. 4%. Half of it, over half, is processed food, and another part is animal products, of which a high amount of the animal products is highly processed animal products. So if you're going to eat the standard American diet, you're in a state of chronic systemic metabolic acidosis. The thing is we heal, and all you have to do is switch to more plant food. I'm not saying you have to be completely plant-based, but you should be. So when your body is acidic, these are all over the place. Your bones are weaker, you're fatigued, you have skin problems, muscle pain, dental problems, weight gain. And so consume more vegetables, and dare we say, cut out. They don't want to say cut out meat, but especially processed meat, because yeah, that's Joey when he was going through his slightly chubby phase. And so we went to an indoor golf place, and I thought it was funny. But he at one time did eat animal products, and not much. And he did completely switch to a whole food plant-based. He's more gung-ho about this than me. If he was here, he'd be telling you have to all get rid of the animal products. And he is slim and exercises and has amazing endurance and inspires me every day. This pictures, I can't remember if I've shown these to you. It was a dude from National Geographic, maybe not National Geographic, but I have the original magazine up in my office. He goes around different countries and he buys a family a week's worth of groceries. And so you can pick which family you want to join for dinner. You can also pick which countries have the highest rates of heart disease, cancer, and what else do you want? Inflammation, osteoporosis. We can name them all. Also, which one has the best hats? I mean, really, if there's any question about it. One of the things that's really hard also is looking in the background of many of these and the amount of soda they're drinking, and the amount of processed food. So I've seen some of the original pictures. And so although we see that certain countries are the poorest, they are eating some of the healthiest foods. And so antioxidants is our way to go, and animal products don't have the antioxidants. So radical oxygen species are free radicals, and if you're going to eat processed meat, it is free radical city. It's the same as smoking cigarettes. It's the same as eating those French fries that are deep fried. And so the antioxidants are in the whole food plant-based diet. And so the reason this is here is because not only is it causing free radicals, it's putting you in a state of that chronic metabolic acidosis. So you're able to come to school, you're able to play sports, you're going for a run, and you're not aware of what's going on inside of your body. Again, Korean War, they did autopsies on the soldiers when they died. So these are 18, 19, 20-year-old boys, and all the American soldiers were showing at 18, 19, and 20 arthrosclerosis. They were showing damage to their arteries, and the Korean soldiers did not have any. And they could not figure out, this is in the 50s, this is before processed food, this is before our consumption of sugar just skyrockets, this is before all the processing of oil. What happened? And it was the school dairy program that got pushed during World War II. That all these boys had grown up drinking their milk every day. Something to ponder. And that's the right key. And so again, alkalosis and antioxidants. I talked about this, I believe, the causes of death in the US. And so diabetes, and I have this because there is something, so all of these, and especially diabetes, losing weight, physical activity, and a whole food plant-based. And so we can choose to do drugs to deal with the diabetes, to deal with the clotting of the blood, to deal with the high blood pressure, or we can choose to do food. And some of you have shared with me who've worked with elderly people that giving them more vegetables, more real food. But saying no meat, that's too drastic. Give me the meds. In 1964, when we said you got to stop smoking, but the argument that I always get, and I know some of you have probably stopped listening because you're like, she's going on. I love my meat. I love my protein drink. Great. This is for the one or two of you who are still listening. You're saying, our bodies are designed to eat meat, right? I have question marks there because that's what my next slide is about. Actually, no, our body is not designed to eat meat. Carnivores, actually all carnivores walk on 4 feet. So you're like, okay, well, we're an omnivore. Our intestines are also much too long for meat. So your dog, your pet dog, their intestines are like only a couple feet long. Ours are 26 feet long. People say, no, we're not meant to eat plant-based because plant-based animals, theirs are much longer than ours. And so it's a ratio of your body size to the length of your intestines. And the unfortunate part is they measured us from head to toe, and that is not our body size, because if we were walking on all fours, our body size, suddenly the feet, the legs would not be included in there. Also, you're not putting your food, doesn't come out your feet, it comes out somewhere else. So if you actually measure the length of your digestive tract and compare it to your small intestines, and also the pH of our stomach is actually not low enough to be carnivores. So we're all saying our stomach isn't acidic enough. Your stomach is acidic because you have to have an acidic stomach to digest, to denature and hydrolyze the protein. If the pH is not low enough, that protein is not getting hydrolyzed. And our teeth, right? Well, let's look at the picture. So you can decide from looking at that. So we might have those fangs, but actually we really don't, because look at your cat. The fangs on your cat are much more impressive. We're definitely not an herbivore. What I'm saying what we are is something called a frugivore. So I actually listened to this guy from India, and he's died. And this talk is from 140 years ago. It's a transcript from it. And he actually, in the yogic sciences, they have promoted this, that you eat fruits and vegetables. And he talked about all these things that they've known for 1,000 years about our digestive system is not meant to eat the amount of animal products we do. We're not the omnivore that eats meat and vegetables. We're more the ones that should be eating fruits, vegetables, and nuts. So something for you to think about. And also animal protein changes our microbiome. So the bacteria in your microbiome wants animal food. It wants the fiber there. It wants the fiber that came in its original vibrational form of fruits and vegetables and legumes. So studies have been done, and they can actually see a flip-flop in like a pretty short time. It was actually days, is my memory from Dr. Greger's book. And they took people who were whole food plant-based, and they had them eat a meal that had animal products, and they actually could see a change to the more disease-causing, less favorable bacteria. And they actually could see vice versa. People ate mostly animal-based. Even if you're only eating like a couple times a week, that actually will keep promoting it. This was the talk I heard. This guy, he's actually very charismatic. He's an MD. He was a cardiologist. And when he turned 40, he went and had his own checkup, 40 or 50. And he was not happy because he realized, because he was the one who'd been counseling people, he was going to have a heart attack. And he took a 6-month sabbatical and started researching it. And he was somebody who loved protein, loved animal products. And he was, for 6 months, he had to take the sabbatical because after the first 2 weeks, he's like, no, don't tell me this. And his wife would come home and he'd have just more papers, scientific papers. And they all pointed every chart that every heart disease, every type of cancer was a perfect correlation to the animal protein intake. And so he is whole food plant-based, and he goes and speaks on it. And as I already mentioned, Mama Gaia can't survive eating the way we Americans eat. And so you can look into it, the whole greenhouse gas. And that's why they actually will talk about one of the biggest things you can do for greenhouse gases is not driving the Prius, is to stop eating the McDonald's hamburgers or the chicken at Chick-fil-A or wherever, because the amount of deforestation, the amount I showed with the cricket slide, that the CO2 produced. But yeah. And just, I think this is the last slide, that the Mediterranean diet, which we will talk about, I think it's in week 9, and the typical Western diet. So you can see their diet, their pyramid on the left is mostly plant-based. They have some animal products, where ours is pretty much flipped from theirs, that it's highly processed, highly sugar and animal product based. And so symbiosis means living in harmony. Your microbiome is happy, and dysbiosis means in harmony or chronic disease pyramid. And that is it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a most beautiful day, and go eat some